Good morning, everybody. It is good to see you all, or to assume that you're there, which I'm going to do. I apologize for this weird looking thing. This is a blanket. Without it there, there's like this super powerful bright light. It looks like I'm being abducted by aliens. With it there, it looks like I'm broadcasting from like a Cold War survival bunker. Either way, here I am, and today we're going to talk about one of my very favorite games, which is Legend of the Five Rings. Okay? This is the 5th edition. I played the 4th edition nonstop. It was for a long time my very favorite RPG. It did a lot of neat things. The main dice mechanic is called roll and keep, where you get a bunch of dice and you roll them, and then you get to keep some of them. And then which ones you keep determine how high the number is, blah, blah, blah. It was really cool. The new edition takes that and does something really neat with it. And the dice, I typically hate proprietary dice mechanics. This one does a really fantastic job. It does something really clever. So let's talk about that. Here, let's go to this. So the dice, there's these special dice right here. And what you get instead of numbers are all these various things, and they represent successes, really great successes that let you re-roll the dice, opportunities that are not successes but that let you do other cool things, and then strife. Now, if you've played any of Fantasy Flight's other games like Star Wars or Genesis, then you're familiar with a lot of this stuff. But strife is new, and strife is what really makes Legend of the Five Rings work, in my opinion. So before we get to strife, let's talk about opportunity. Opportunities are really fun because it is a great fail-forward mechanic. And it happens whether you fail or not. You roll your dice, you get a certain number of successes. So like if this, let's say that these 4 dice right here were what you rolled. So this is nothing. That's a success. That's a success plus a strife. And this is an opportunity. So if the target number you were trying to hit was 2 successes, well then congratulations, you succeeded. And you also get to do a neat thing. If the target number you were going for was 3 successes, you failed, but you still get to do an extra neat thing. And there's a lot of things you can do with opportunity. It's almost too many. In fact, I've seen a lot of complaints online from people who are playing the game who think that there's just too much to do with opportunity and that it slows the game down to try to figure out exactly what to do with it. I think that if you play the game and you don't have a big player handout with all the options on it, and if your players are attempting to maximize the utility of every single roll, then absolutely it's going to bog things down. That's not how the group that I have played with, the 2 groups that I've played this game with, play it. Opportunity is there to add interest when you need it and to just forget it when you don't and let the game move on. So there's, opportunity is like, say you're trying to ask an innkeeper for some information and you don't get it out of her. You fail the roll and she doesn't want to tell you what you want to know. But you can spend that opportunity so that, for example, you do become friends with her so that future tests will be a little easier. Or maybe you don't learn what you want to know, but you do get a gift, or you learn something completely different. Or maybe you just happen to, while you're talking to her, see something else that gives you a clue about something other unrelated thing. There's so many different things you can do with opportunity. Every skill has extra opportunities. Most of the katas and the invocations and all of the techniques that you can use will have extra things to do with opportunity. So it's a really neat thing. But right now we're going to talk about strife. So this gets at the core of what samurai drama is about. And it brings this out in a way that no previous edition of Legend of the Five Rings has managed to do. And to be fair, they were trying to do different things. This one wants to focus very clearly on this idea of the disparity between what you're trying to accomplish, what you are supposed to accomplish, and what you want to accomplish, right? And this, they have this built into, let's look back at the character sheet again. They have here the ninjo and the giri. Those are, okay, I said let's look at it, and then I didn't show it to you. Here we go. So there's the ninjo right there, and then there's the giri right there. And these are core elements of your character. The ninjo is what you want to do, and the giri is your duty. And ideally, those two are going to be slightly at odds with each other. So for example, let's say that your lord has asked you to something really simple, to defend the honor of your clan, to defeat the enemies of the empire, something like that. But maybe what you actually desire to do is you are in love with a certain person and you want to marry them. Or maybe what you desire to do is just to be alone and to ride your horse out in the wilderness. I played this game with my kids, and one of my kids had that one as her ninjo. That's what she actually desired to do, was to be out in nature, take off her shoes, and just be there. And so every adventure that we got into, every scenario that we played, she was there, she was trying to do the right thing, she was trying to fulfill her lord's, commands, but what she really wanted to do was this other thing. And so then as you're rolling the dice, and let's look back at the dice, as you're rolling the dice and the strife keeps popping up there, you choose, of course, how many dice you roll and then how many of those dice you're going to keep. So let's say that you roll these 4 dice here on the side and that's your result. And you need 2 successes. Well, do you want to choose to not keep this die? Because it would help you succeed, but it would also add strife. And if the strife builds up high enough, then you start to lose your composure. The game leans very heavily into this idea that will be familiar if you've seen, some old movies like Yojimbo or Seven Samurai or things like that, Rashomon, where there's this sense of, I need to maintain this very perfect facade with perfect manners, and I need to always be doing the right thing. But sometimes it builds up. Your emotions start roiling inside. And the game does make it clear that while it's called strife, it's basically just emotion. It could be positive or negative emotions. Maybe, you start to feel too stressed out, or you start to feel something negative. Or just as likely, that strife could represent the thrill of battle, or your positive emotions when you see the object of your love, or something like that. And when those build up too high, then you start to, there's 2 effects that happen. One is that you lose your composure. You become compromised, is the rule. And then that makes all of your other rolls much weaker while you're working on, while you are compromised, because you're basically expending all of your energy to maintain this facade of prim and proper correctness. And then you can unmask. And unmasking basically means you get rid of all your strife, it all goes away, but you do something outside of the bounds of propriety. Whether that is something bad, like you break down, you cry or you scream or you attack somebody you're not supposed to, or maybe it's good. Maybe unmasking is the only way that you can breach protocol and confess your love to somebody that you're in love with. And so strife is a really cool way of managing that, and I really dig it as a mechanic. Let's take a look at the character sheet here, because this is going to help us understand a little more about how the game works. Okay, so right up here, it's called Legend of the 5 Rings. These are the 5 rings. They're primarily elemental. There is earth, air, fire, void, and water. And each one has a specific kind of flavor to it that you can probably guess because it's very intuitive. Fire is fierce and passionate and overwhelming. Earth is solid and calm and defensive, and so on and so on, right? Void is kind of the weird one. It's like the mystic, meditative one. Air is tricky, water is flexible, etc. So as you build your character, and we'll get into that process in a second because it's awesome, you will end up with a certain number of ranks in these rings. And everybody starts with one in each ring, and then by the end of character creation, you can have up to 3. You'll probably have 3 in 2 of them, 2 in 1 of them, and then 1 in the others. So you'll have 1 to 3 ranks as a starting character in each ring. Down here then are the skills. And skills use ranks as well. And a starting character will have maybe 5 or 6 skills, and again, up to 3 ranks in a couple of them. And so when it is time for you to do something, you will say what you want to do. You'll pick one of these skills. So maybe it's just straight up attacking. Right here, we're going to use martial arts, melee. Okay, well then what is your approach? Are you trying to overwhelm them with an attack? Are you trying to shift around them to the side? Are you trying to feint and trick them? And so the approach that you take to the skill dictates what ring you use. So let's say it's just an incredibly straightforward, I'm going to hit this guy with everything I have. Okay, well then that's martial arts melee, and you're going to use fire. So let's say you have 2 ranks in melee and 2 ranks in fire. Then you are going to roll. Let's go back to our picture of the dice. You are going to roll. The white dice are for skills and the black dice are for rings. And so that will determine how many dice you roll, and then you keep the number of dice based on the rings you have. So in this case, with 2 dice in melee, that's 2 white dice. 2 dice in fire, that's 2 black dice. You roll 4 of these and you get to keep 2 of them. And that's the whole dice mechanic. So going back to this, to the character sheet, let's say you want to do something different. Let's say you want to write a poem. That's going to be composition right here. And so depending on how you want to write a poem, what kind of poem you want to write, you're in a court and you're trying to impress people, and so you've got this you want to invent something brand new. That would again be fire. If you want to write a more tricky poem, maybe refine a poem that you have earlier already said to somebody, well then it's going to be a combination of composition and air, and so on. So every time that you act, you will declare your skill, you'll declare your approach, and that'll tell you what your dice are, and you'll roll them, and then that will, then things happen. Okay? And it's really an elegant system, in my opinion, and it works really well. Plus, the opportunities and the strife make every roll interesting, whether you succeed or fail. So it's not just roll the dice, you missed, okay, next guy's turn. It's you roll the dice, you pick what you want, and then there's this very cool, fluid role-playing scenario that comes out of every die roll. It's a great way to go. So let's take a look now at character creation. Character creation is done with what's called the game of 20 questions, and it takes a long time. Okay? Experienced role players are going to fly through this a lot more quickly than, for example, my children when we all built characters over Christmas break. But it's even for experienced role players, it's going to take a long time. For power gamers and min-maxers, it's going to take a lot longer, but honestly not as much as you might think. Because while there are a lot of options, those options are all kind of basically the same. Let's take a look at this again. Everybody is going to have, there's a kind of an advantage and disadvantage system, which can really drag things out if somebody really wants to dig into the nitty-gritty of it. But what I like about this add and disadd system is the distinctions, which are advantages. There's a ton of different ones, but mechanically they're all more or less the same, right? So let's say that you have the distinction of being an expert tracker. That's actually an extra one that comes in a supplement book. but it's the one that came to mind. Well, then when you are trying to track somebody through the wasteland, then you get to use this distinction, which lets you re-roll some dice. Or maybe you're just very good at talking to people. Well, then you get to re-roll 2 dice when you talk to people. And so there's a lot of flavor to it, and there's a huge list. There's 30 or 40 different things that you can do, that you can choose as distinctions, but they all kind of mechanically do the same thing, which makes it really nice. It just depends on which dice you get to re-roll in which situations. Adversities are similar. Something that you are bad at, because maybe you are haunted by the spirit of an ancestor. Maybe you have been wounded by a demon, and so you carry a demon wound on you. Maybe you have a bitter betrothal. You are betrothed or actually married to somebody that you hate or who hates you. There's a lot of cool flavor to it. And anytime that situation occurs in the game, then you just have to re-roll a couple of your successes. So mechanically, it's all kind of the same thing. Passions and anxieties both deal with strife. And I love this system because it adds so much depth to the character. Let's say, for example, that your passion is bonsai, is the little kind of miniature trees, and you love to craft them, and you love to, do this very precise, create these little trees. Well, then, in game terms, when your strife starts to build up, maybe you've just been in a really rough battle or a really tense court conversation or whatever it is, and you've got a lot of strife and you're at risk of losing, of becoming compromised or having to unmask yourself. Well, then you can retreat to this thing that you love, and you can pull out your bonsai trees, and you can kind of clip them, and you can groom them, and that will get rid of some of your strife. And so it's just a really nice way of mingling the mechanics with the role playing. Maybe what you love is, again, with my daughter's character, nature, and she loves her homeland. And so anytime that she gets really stressed out or that strife starts to build up, then she finds someone, one of the NPCs or another character, and she's like, let me tell you about my homeland. And then she will wax poetic about the rolling hills and the vast open plains and all of these great things. And that lowers her strife. It's a cool system. Anxieties do the opposite. You've got an anxiety, something that you're freaking out about, or something that always bothers you. Maybe you never like to be alone. And anytime you're forced to be alone, well then, you're going to start building up extra strife. So it all works together. But let's take a look at the game of 20 questions itself. So these are, as the name implies, 20 questions that take, in my experience, 30 to 45 minutes to actually go through per character, where you can build all of this stuff out. So you pick a clan, and that gives you a couple of bonuses. You pick a family, and then that will give you some extra bonuses. Then you pick a school, which is the most analogous thing to a class that this game has, and that will give you some extra bonuses, and it will give you some techniques and abilities and so on, and you'll go through that. Before we talk about the clans, let's move down here and talk about some of the other questions. You get to define your Giri and your Ninjo, your duty, and then what you actually want to be doing instead. These 2 questions are kind of based on loyalty is the wrong word, but commitment or conformity, I guess. Like if you are a part of the Lion Clan, are you all in on Lion Clan? Do you agree with everything that they do, or are you a bit of a rebel? Depending on what you pick, you'll get a different bonus. What about Bushido, which is the Warrior's Code? Do you love that, or is there maybe 1 or 2 principles that you are not so big on? One of the common ones that I see is duty. One of the principles of Bushido is duty. And I've seen several players say, you know what, duty is important, but I'm not going to do something wrong, even if my Lord commands me to. And so duty is like the one principle where they kind of back away and they are not fully committed. And so then they will get a different bonus depending on whether they are all in or backing off a little bit. And then, these questions determine these questions right here. That's where you get the advantages and the disadvantages. Then we come over to more stuff here. What do people notice about you? What makes you different? How do you react to stress? What are your existing relationships with other clans? These are all these great questions. What do your parents think of you? How would your parents describe you? It's so much more detailed than a lot of games get into, and it really helps create, in my experience, a very rounded character. And obviously, an experienced role player is going to have a rounded character regardless. But this one is built into the system from the ground up. It helps get new role players, such as my children, off the ground, you know, running. And so it's a great system. Now let's talk about the clans, okay? We'll go back up here. What is your clan and what does your character belong to? This is, in flavor terms, kind of the heart of Legend of the Five Rings. It is a it's a fantasy adventure role-playing game that is based on Asian mythology and medieval kind of lore rather than European. And so primarily Japanese, but it's easy to spot a lot of influence from other cultures as well. And so rather than having different races in it, like elves and dwarves and stuff like that, they basically just have different clans. And so there's 7 great clans, which are crab, crane, dragon, lion. Did I get them all? Yeah, phoenix, scorpion, unicorn. And they each have a very, kind of unique flavor to them and their own vibe and their own personality, and it's really cool. And then, there are families within those clans, and then the clans themselves. Here, let me show you. Let me make sure that you can see this as well as you need to be seeing this. Okay, so sorry, I don't have this book in PDF, so you just have to take my word for it. And this is not super easy to see, but that big table that you can see right there, that is the advancement scheme for a school. And the schools, like I said, are classes. The advancement scheme is, I think, really comparable in a lot of ways to what Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay uses, which is once you've chosen a class, then there are a bunch of options within that class and levels within that class as well. And then as you gain experience, rather than leveling up, a character level, what you're doing is you're just buying extra things. You get an extra rank in a skill, you get an extra technique that you can use, and then and my doggy is whining. Hey, doggy, I will help you in just a minute, okay? I'm almost done with this. Yeah, and so then as you accrue enough extra abilities within that school advancement scheme, then you get to go up to rank 2 in the school and rank 3 in the school and so on up to 5, at which point you get a super awesome ability and it's really great. So it's a wonderful game. I am really enjoying this new edition of it. The lore, it is a steep learning curve to get into the lore of Legend of the Five Rings, because it is a game where culture matters, where manners matter, where understanding how to talk to somebody is just as important as being able to hit them with a sword. In fact, in the big, huge campaign that we ran that went a couple of years, the scenes most people remember so much stronger than the fights were negotiations with rival courts. They can be every bit as tense and deadly as a battle scene, just because you have to be so careful about what you say and how you say it and who you speak to. And so there can be a big investment up front, especially for the players, that they will have to understand the empire of Rokugan, and they will have to know what the different clans do, and they will have to know a lot about the culture. It is, in my experience, absolutely worth it to take this time. And if you've played any previous version of the game and you were kind of staying away from this one because of the weird proprietary dice, I encourage you to dive in. because the dice actually do some really great things that add a lot of flavor and impact to the game. So, Legend of the Five Rings, 5th edition from Fantasy Flight. It's a super great game, and I hope that you give it a chance and play it sometime. Anyway, I'm Dan Wells. It's been good to talk to you. If you want to learn any more about me, then I've got all this awesome stuff that you can look up. I've got a website, and of course, I'm the game master of Typecast RPG, which is a Twitch show where we are going through a D&D campaign. So, you're great, and I hope to see you soon. Thanks for joining me. Bye.